Welcome to This Week in Cannabis Live. I am Jay Rosenthal from Cultivated. That is AnnaRae, Grabstein from High Spirits. No, am I doing the wrong way?
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Anyway, next to Jeremy, AnnaRae's, I don't know, screen right. Jeremy Berke from Cultivated. Ben Larson from High Spirits is here. Marc Hauser from Cannabis Musings. We got a full house today. Welcome, everybody.
It's good to be back.
Friday.
Yeah, everybody's. It's like the family table is now is full. I like it. Can we start?
Start
with
arguing.
A special announcement because we're congratulating Ben Larson as a repeat offender of. Hold on, I'm going to show it. Let's see. Hold on. On this list, the Cannabis 420 list from Forbes. Yeah, Ben, you're on this list again. Congratulations. You're in some great company.
We are.
Yeah. Including some of the people that we're very close to. I haven't looked at the list till this morning, but certainly Joanne Wilson is our partner in our New York events from Gotham. And then as the list goes on, Ben, you're listed not with a picture so much, but we'll get the picture up.
Someday we'll be picture worthy.
Yeah, you're picture worthy here. Anybody? If I haven't taken a full list look at the list, but anybody taking a full list? AnnaRae, you seem to have done a deep dive. What say you about this, aside from Ben being on it?
Yeah, I looked through. I've got a couple companies that I am close with on there. Shout out to Coastal Sun, and you already shouted out Ben with Vertosa. Tons of great companies on there. I'd say that the list seems to not just be a vanity list. It's like those are real leaders and real companies, and so it's one of the better lists that gets put out, I would say.
Well, and credit to Forbes for doing it consistently. I think they've been doing it for 4 or 5 years now, and it's nice to see evergreen things that actually stick around and not just a one hitter quitter.
It's nice to see yourself on it again.
Yeah. That doesn't hurt.
But I love being on it.
I do love being on it.
I think that's what Ben just said. So congratulations, Ben. We'll link to that in the show notes as we go. But Jeremy, one of the people that I saw next to Joanne was Vince Ning from NABIS. And we had a story this week on Cultivated about oil prices and the impact on the industry. Give us a deep dive of sort of what that story was about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's all feels like a bit of a moot point now that it seems like there is a ceasefire coming in the Strait and oil prices are cratering from where they were. So I was interested in the sort of economy macro picture of how cannabis companies, which have relatively complex supply chains for the size of the companies they are, how oil prices are affecting this. NABIS is one of the largest distributors in California, and I think they have probably one of the biggest distribution businesses in the US. And so, Vince gave Chris, our reporter, Chris Kasakia, an inside look at what happens when oil surges to $110 a barrel and what that means for the cannabis industry. There's some pretty interesting inside details about, the circuitous routes that NABIS is forcing its truck to take to avoid tolls because of, the federal interstate commerce rules, how they're trying to save gas in terms of sort of routing them around and using AI to do so, which is pretty interesting. And he had a really good quote, which I thought, told the story in as much words. He said, this is Vince, the CEO of NABIS. He said, it feels like playing a video game when the level of difficulty just increases a bit and you have to keep thinking of new ways to address problems. That is cannabis distribution, but I think that is operating in the cannabis industry in a nutshell. And Chris got some very good details from NABIS and other companies at the big companies and the small companies. And he even got some pretty frank comments from a founder who had to shut down his business, not solely because of energy prices, but because that was just another challenge layered on top of all the challenges of doing business in the cannabis industry.
I see a lot of nodding. Mark, this jives with what you're hearing?
Oh yeah, I mean, and even in the most hidden of places like cash pickup from dispensaries through armored car services. All those armored car services have a fuel surcharge that so that's the cost of that to the retailer is only going to increase. I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, their oil prices are cratering, but remember, about a year ago, a barrel of oil was what, $60 or so, and now it's cratered down to 90. So I mean, and it's going to take a while for those gas prices to really come back down.
Yeah, I was in Florida, which is a relatively cheap gas state, and it was like well over $4 a gallon, which seems like a lot for Florida. It doesn't seem like a lot for California, where you guys are, but it does seem like a lot for Florida. And it actually seems like a bargain, frankly, for what we pay here in Canada, where we do it by the liter. We get the prices by the liter. But if you add up 4 liters, it's a gallon, and we're well over $7 and usually are over $5. Ben, you're a business runner. You're on the Forbes list. What say you?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, we're so used to the cost of business just perpetually going up. So this is this week's flavor of how my business is going to get more expensive to run. And, the interesting thing about oil prices is they do go up and down. But what we've learned from like price increases from, say, like the pandemic is that like oftentimes when the costs go up, the front line that is shouldering those costs, they then pass those down to their customers. Right. But the question is, when their prices adjust, do they then pass on that savings to the customers and lower the prices, or is this their next like ratchet up, and then they start building in the margin for themselves as the prices adjust?
Yeah, it's
it's interesting. We saw it during the pandemic. When a lot of the cost of everything was going up, cannabis really didn't have the luxury of raising its prices in the same way. And because just the nature of the business, I mean, for a lot of different reasons, it couldn't really get away with increasing those prices to the retail customer without, really killing sales. And so I wonder here too, particularly with prices coming down in a lot of states, continuing to come down and more competition, I sort of suspect that we're going to have the same problem again.
Yeah.
Margin is going to get
that's a very good segue. I like when there's a natural segue. But this week we published the East Coast Eighth Index, where our partners at Little Alerts track the price of an eighth across 5 East Coast markets. Here, I don't know if you can see this okay, but I'll try to increase the size. Massachusetts continues to be sort of the lowest one there on the bottom rung, but New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and Maryland sort of bunched together around between sort of $35 and $40 for an eighth in those states. An evening out, whether that's sort of seasonal or whether that is market compression or normalization or more competition or all of those things. This week I spoke to a Vermont State College class. They were quite interested in this, probably as purchasers of eighths themselves, and Vermont is actually more expensive than this. Any thoughts on this? Does this just look like a normal curve for most markets sort of in the maturity pattern?
I mean, they're all going to eventually be Massachusetts, so they should prepare for that.
True. So get ready. No gas prices no gas prices. That's coming.
Yeah, I mean, whether or not it happens super quickly is a little bit hard to say. Like these states that have these higher eighth prices have some supply constraint that Massachusetts doesn't have, but that supply constraint likely will not last forever. New York just allowed canopy expansion, and there's going to be more supply that continues to come online. How long it takes for the supply to catch up with a reduced price, it might not be this year, but it will probably be next.
Yeah, it's a race towards Massachusetts and nobody ever, but it is interesting in the markets that are still evolving. Let's say those sort of top 4 that they are headed to. Like, how do you bake that in? I mean, AnnaRae, you talk to a lot of companies. Like, how do you bake that into your future company? Like, how far out do you want to project where the price will be $23 an eighth?
I mean, you should know that your company is healthy at $23 an eighth. You just should. And you should figure that it's going to happen within 24 months. And if it doesn't happen in 24 months and it takes 36 months and you get more time with a higher price, that's fabulous. Yeah. But it is going to happen. And if we looked at the eighth price, I don't have it in front of me, across a whole bunch of other markets, this is just a predictable pattern. So the companies that are in Maryland and in New Jersey and New York are getting this cash right now, theoretically. But what I see most often happen is that when these markets are in that mature phase, the companies are also immature. And so they haven't figured out how to operate efficiently yet. So instead of it costing them $80 to process a pound of flour, it costs them $180 to process a pound of flour because they don't have the right machine and they don't have trained staff and they haven't set up their production line really efficiently yet. So often it's also indicative of the lack of maturity of the operators who feel that they need to charge that much in order to get, a 45 to 50% gross margin. But that will change as they get more efficient as well.
Yep. I want to shift again because I don't know if there's a good natural segue, but I want to shift again because there was, let's call it late breaking news or late breaking information this week about a new hemp bill, ? That would extend not or do away with the ban. I haven't read the bill because I think it just got posted. But Ben and Mark, this is your favorite topic. So I want to ask you what you think, what you've read so far, and maybe what the impact will be, and then we'll go to Ben. Mark, you made great quote last week that made its way around social about edibles.com opening a hemp-derived store in Georgia. So I'm going to give this one to you first.
Oh yeah, and that was and then we got I forgot the gentleman's name, but the
Thomas Winstanley,
yeah, he came on and interacted in the trade machine, which was great. I've not had a chance to sort of fully absorb the bill, all of like 4 pages. But it basically, the idea, I think it was Rand Paul and I think it was Amy Klobuchar, proposing that in November, states that want to continue to allow for hemp-derived THC products can continue to do so, and that interstate commerce among those states would be allowed to continue. The interesting things that jump out to me immediately are one, it does provide for age gating, or require it, I should say. But it doesn't, one thing that jumped out to me, it doesn't really deal with any of the sort of trade practice issues, the other trade practice issues that the alcohol producers and the AGs also had sort of raised concerns about. And whether, things like that will try to get built in order to appease them. But it doesn't, it solves a problem, but it doesn't solve some of the other problems that others had raised and were concerns that were and pushback on this, such as again, whether you love the term or not, gas station weed, and and that would remain out there. So I don't know how what kind of legs this has.
Yeah, gas station weed is different than gassy weed. Ben, your first look at this?
Well, yeah. Anytime I see Rand Paul's name, I immediately wonder how many legs it has, so to speak. But what I will say is that this wasn't widely socialized before it landed, and so it was kind of coming out of left field. It is interesting in the fact that it's solving one problem that a lot of people haven't been talking about, which is like, what does happen if November comes along and things are banned, but states have these regulated systems they've set up. And so in essence, this is similar to the cannabis legislation that we've seen in the past, where it's like, oh, can 2 legal cannabis states transact with each other and transport cannabis is kind of how I'm interpreting this. Again, not reading it like you gentlemen. Now, something that Diana Berline of Cabo likes to say a lot is that this year there's going to be a lot of hooks in the water, and we got to see how they work together, see which ones start to catch fish and which ones start to run. And so if this one starts to run, it could solve one of the problems in one of the scenarios that are possible this year. But there are other conversations specifically coming out of Kentucky, where Rand Paul's from. And one of those conversations is with William Barr, Brown Forman, and the Brown Liquor folks, and obviously there's Mitch McConnell's influence over all this. And so anytime something like this happens, it's like you start to do like the 12-step political process and see what truly does have legs. And like I said, this one wasn't well socialized. I think it's clear that there's still a lot of money going into politicians' pockets this year, and that will continue. So there'll continue to be a lot of noise. But I think all in all, the more that we are talking about this, the more we're talking about cannabis, the more we're talking about hemp, and the more that it's in front of people in Congress, like the more they're going to want to try to solve something, hopefully at some point.
I also like the idea that there's a Venn diagram where Amy Klobuchar and Rand Paul agree on something, maybe. I like a good Venn diagram, and it's probably pretty thin, knowing the two of them. But so we will continue to sort of go ahead, AnnaRae.
Yeah, so this week on High Spirits, we had Dawson Hobbs from Wine and Spirits Wholesalers on to talk about what's going on for federal policy. And one of the things that I think is relevant to this discussion around the hemp bill with Amy Klobuchar and Rand Paul is that we talked about kind of what is the likelihood of standalone legislation actually being a solve to this, whereas we saw that the ban, quote unquote, that happened in November was a part of a larger legislative package. And I think that Dawson had some good insights, and he said that it's likely not going to happen, that standalone hemp legislation is going to move, but that the standalone bills are really important because what they do is they create a space for debate in Congress and the opportunity for people to testify and for the elected representatives to debate and think about the issue. And then kind of it creates a platform for language that then can get pulled in to bigger pieces of legislation. So I think also that's what this is doing, is saying, well, here's this other part of the discussion that needs to be considered. We've got all these states that have regulatory programs. They put a lot of effort into that. Republicans are supposed to be states first. So let's talk about it. And I think that's what this represents, is a conversation in DC about how to deal with the difference between the state and the federal reality. Fair
enough. I want to shift gears a bit because last week we shared, AnnaRae and Ben, you weren't with us, but we got debanked on a red eye that Jeremy was on. He got the text when he landed. Jeremy, you want to give an update sort of about where we are with our banking? You wrote about it in a great piece today in our newsletter, which I would direct people to at cultivated.news, but give us sort of the thumbnail sketch of where we are with our banking.
Yeah, sure. So we are back up and running thanks to our friends at Safe Harbor. We're set up with Partners Colorado Credit Union. So, look, we have a bank account. It's all good. All that being said, had Chase not jerked us around, we would probably still be a Chase banking customer. And so, I sort of want to put that out there. And I wrote the piece. I was getting a lot of questions about what happened, why it happened. And I thought that this had some, sort of quality about just the difficulties of running a small, very tiny business like ours, even outside of cannabis, right? Like just dealing with getting your bank account cut off when you're trying to pay people, when you're coming off a red-eye flight, when you have money coming in, really sucks. It really, really sucks. It really threw a curveball and everything. So I sort of wrote the TikTok about what happened and why to sort of answer some questions and hopefully get that information out there, whether it can be helpful to others within the cannabis industry, whether, our little platform can help lawmakers understand the issue from, a more nuanced perspective and do something to help, right? Because, like I said in the piece today, which I hope you all read, the only reason we got a secondary review from Chase, which, I take to mean a real human and not an algorithm, the only reason we got a second phone call from their executive office was because I'm a journalist, right? And they did not really want issues with the journalist. So, if you're not a journalist, you probably have no recourse. I think that's pretty unfair. Chase is a private company. It can do whatever it wants. At the same time, I think there are probably ways that the bank can better understand and better help the entrepreneurs that it claims to support in all of its commercials.
Can I ask you a question that I did think was answered in your piece, which I did read? Since the piece was supposed to answer all the questions. And one thing that you said in there was that you had this bank account for 3 years. And my thought was, well, why the heck did you get a Chase bank account in the first place 3 years ago? Because we have known that these big banks have been unsupportive of cannabis. Did you think that because you were not a cannabis licensee that it would be fine? Or was it just because like Chase is downstairs and it's so convenient so often?
Yeah, well, one is I had a good connection from my MBA program that helped me set up the account. So that was like the human touch. The second piece was perhaps extremely naively, I'm rather confident in my ability to fight people and negotiate against banks and et cetera. And so I had a win with Stripe, who tried to get off dealing with our account, and I fought them and won. And I thought, you know what, like if Chase wants to mess with us, I'll just get on the phone and yell at them. And lo and behold, I was correct that like ultimately like I could have gotten the account back. At the same time, AnnaRae, like point very well taken. I think there's a little bit of naivety. I wanted to have a proper Chase account. I didn't, at the time, thought the company had the potential to grow a lot very rapidly. I wanted the full service support in New York City where I live, et cetera, that a big bank could offer. It was naive. Like I should have gone with safe harbor in the beginning. All that being said, right? Like, it's going to sort of take an act of Congress to fix this. And I thought, again, 3 years ago that act of Congress might be coming a little bit sooner. It did not.
Yeah, makes sense. I get
That's fair.
Yeah.
Fair
It's just
question.
with all your reporting about cannabis, I figured that you knew that banking was challenging.
Well,
I did. Yeah, I did. It's look, like we're a media company, and I think that at the end of the day, like it should be pretty, obvious to a bank's KYC, know your customer rules, right? But again, like I said in the piece, like Chase is its own. They make their own risk calculus. Like we were not a very good customer. Probably we paid our credit card bill on time. We don't have a bunch of money sitting in a savings account. Like the money is sort of flowing through the account. So why deal with us? I think was ultimately the determination they made. And so lesson learned.
Can I just pause for a second because I live in Canada, but earlier today recorded a piece with an operator in Canada, a dispensary owner called Northern Helm. And we've had legalization since 2018. Cannabis was illegal federally in the medical capacity for a very, very long time. Banking isn't an issue, except it is an issue here too. He's been with the same bank for 6 years. Access to debt and capital is as limited as it's ever been. So just a cautionary tale that even with rescheduling, even with safe banking, banks like Chase are not necessarily getting into the cannabis industry and not soon either. And the industry itself will still be looked at as a high-risk industry, whether you consider that as the businesses that are high-risk go out of business. The cash flow is not particularly good. The margins are not great. Everybody's a relatively new operator. Nobody's going to have a retailer for the past 20 years where they have books to show for 20 years. Like, this takes a very long time, whether you are a media company at Chase or you are a real operator operating at scale. Like, banking is not going to be a snap decision overnight, and banks like Chase it may take 20 years to get to be a real bank for retailers in the space or operators in the space. Just words of caution.
Yeah, one thing I'll add that I to AnnaRae's good question, which didn't make it into the piece because as my wife was reading it last night, she's like, it's too long, no one cares, and so I listened to that. So this didn't make it into the piece, but when I opened the account, I received the call from the same Chase executive office, and they were very interested in how they could support my business banking needs. I was offered, better credit lines and all these sort of products, to help grow the business. And the reason was because small businesses that were started in, a couple zip codes in lower Manhattan and Brooklyn, tend to be high performing businesses. So there's sort of startup energy cluster. And that's why I received that phone call. It had nothing to do with me. It just sort of had to do with the zip code. And so look, like at the beginning, certainly they did want to support us and they did want to help out. That turned out not to be the case.
Till we actually started generating some revenue.
Till our wire payments were enough to trigger whatever algorithm triggered. But look, like, the whole story, like I think it's kind of instructive and interesting in terms of, a lesson learned. Like, deal with the friendly banks. You know, if you're watching this.
And it's not just Chase. It's also Bank of America. I was just reading this post from, some of you might know Guillermo Bravo. He's been on this side of the space from a marketing perspective, but his company is like very much not cannabis. He has, I think, one cannabis client. He got one cannabis wire. 95% of his customer base is non-cannabis. He's SEO, and his bank just completely shut him down with no notice. And it's like, it feels like we're regressing in some aspects. So we definitely need some positive movement on legislation.
It never fails to surprise me that banks don't want our money, that it's not good enough for them for whatever reason. But my guess, most people listening to this, and I bet most of you have had a bank shut down in cannabis for your business, even if you thought that they were going to be cannabis friendly at the beginning. Banks shut down, guys? Yeah.
Multiple.
read the fine print.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the fine print on any bank account will tell you they can shut it at any time, is my guess. I mean, I don't read the fine print.
The fine print of running a cannabis company is have redundancy all across the supply chain.
Yep. Yeah. And so now we're making Cultivated a completely cash business. We think that'll be easier. Just kidding.
Cultivated cash.
There. I want to shift to something we're going to start adding at the end of every show, and that is winners and losers. I didn't let everybody on this call know we were going to do this, but Ben, we're going to start with you. And if anybody else has a winner or loser of the week,
I got one too.
Ben, you're going first.
Yeah, AnnaRae mentioned Dawson Hobbs from the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America. I'm going to give mine this week to him because, or more broadly, the WSWA. They're starting an entire grassroots effort to make it very easy for consumers to write to their legislators and show support for the category. So this is big alcohol, the big scary beast, coming in and creating tools to help us get the word out and empower the American people.
Anybody else, winner or loser?
Yeah, I have one, perhaps controversial. Governor Abigail Spanberger, why are you delaying the launch? I think it's odd. I understand that when I read through her proposal, they seem reasonable. None of those seem like things that you can't accomplish before January 1st, 2027, if you really care about it and work on it. I think delaying the launch, as we've seen in New York, it does allow, especially since Virginia has been legal for so long prior to rolling out cannabis sales, it does allow the gray market to continue to flourish, to get more entrenched, for the illicit market operators to get smarter at skirting regulations. I think there's going to be a lot of challenges on the back end with enforcement if they delay the extra 6 months that she is proposing. She said she spoke with governors in other states who did roll out cannabis legalization. I would question which governor she spoke to and what advice she got. I don't think this is a good idea. But, more power to her. She ran a great campaign. She turned Virginia blue. She's a great politician. I just think she's wrong on this issue.
There you go. That's your loser of the week. AnnaRae, Mark, do you have a winner or loser?
I'll do a winner, and that is for California. I think that California has been looked at for a while as just a floundering state when it comes to successive companies. And we've seen a couple really big deals announced, all from public companies. And I think that California has the attention of MSOs again. There's still plenty of challenges. The state's trying to make things even harder to operate per usual. So there's some loser stuff going on too. But I think that California is starting to come back into favor in the eyes of capital, in the eyes of companies who have previously fled, and that we're going to see more action on the back of deals like the Vireo Glasshouse joint venture. There was just another announcement this morning of an acquisition by Leaf of a vape company. There's just going to be more and more companies that are operating kind of at the top end of the cohort that are consolidating and seeing success. And I think MSOs are paying attention.
Mark, any winners, losers for the week, or you come back to you next week?
We're all winners because it's 420 weekend.
There you go.
Love it.
So it's and we'll all definitely be winners if the point of sale software doesn't crash.
We'll leave that one there.
Should we do an over/under on that?
I have a winner. I have a winner loser too, but here's hoping that is still the case. I spoke this week to the Cannabis Studies program at Vermont State College. Vermont is a place close to my heart, and these students were engaged, interested. We did deep dives in different regulatory models for legalization. We talked about Canada. We talked about Vermont. We talked about New York, California, all the rest. So shout out to the Cannabis Studies program as a winner at the Vermont State University system. It was great, and thank you for having me. It was a great conversation, great questions, and included a student from Africa, from Ghana, which we're going to actually talk to a bit on the Cultivated side, because there's some legalization happening in Africa we want to dive deeper into. So thank you all at the Cannabis Studies program. That's my winner of the week. And you guys are all winners too. Don't think you're not. Just because Ben's on the list, don't think you're not all winners.
I'm the winner.
yeah, really, Ben is the winner, but we're just like one tier below. So AnnaRae, Jeremy, Marc, and Ben, thanks so much for joining us here on this Friday. We'll be back next Friday with This Week in Cannabis Live. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.